Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. 5 years ago, I purchased my dream home in a quiet neighborhood with an HOA. The property wasn't particularly large, but it had one spectacular feature that made me fall in love with it instantly. A gorgeous in-ground pool with a small waterfall feature. I'd saved for years to afford a place with a pool, and when I finally found this one, I knew it was meant to be. I'm not the type to cause trouble. I've always paid my HOA fees on time, maintained my property meticulously, and followed all the rules. I even hosted occasional pool parties for neighbors during summer months, always giving proper notice to the HOA as required. Everyone seemed to appreciate having access to a pool a few times a year without the hassle of maintaining one. The previous HOA board members were reasonable people. We didn't always agree on everything, but they were fair and willing to listen. That all changed about 6 months ago when a new family moved into the house that backs up to mine, separated only by a narrow strip of common green space that serves as a utility easement. The woman who moved in, let's call her the new neighbor, quickly made herself known in the neighborhood. Within 3 months of arriving, she had somehow maneuvered her way into becoming the HOA president during our annual elections. Many longtime residents didn't bother voting, assuming the previous president would continue as usual. This new neighbor had mentioned several times how she wished she could afford a pool for her family. "The kids would just love a pool," she'd say whenever she saw me in my backyard. "It must be nice to have so much extra money." Her comments always carried an edge of resentment that made me uncomfortable. Last month, I left for a week-long business trip. I locked up the house, secured the pool gate with its electronic keypad, and asked my trusted neighbor across the street to keep an eye on things. When I returned home, exhausted from travel, I dropped my bags in the foyer and headed straight to the kitchen for a glass of water. Glancing out the back window, I froze. The new neighbor and her entire family were splashing around in my pool. I rushed outside. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to keep my voice level. "What are you doing in my pool?" The new neighbor looked up, completely unfazed. "Oh, you're back. We're just enjoying the community pool. Beautiful day for it, isn't it?" "Community pool? This is my private pool. It's on my property," she laughed as if I'd told a joke. "Actually, there's been a correction to the property lines. This pool is technically on HOA land, which makes it a community amenity." She climbed out and reached for a folder sitting on what used to be my patio table, which had been moved from its usual spot. "I don't understand," I said, noticing her kids had left various toys floating in the water and towels strewn across my lounge chairs. "I own this pool. I have the deed and property survey." "Those are outdated," she replied, handing me a document with the HOA letterhead. "As president, I had our records reviewed. This pool actually sits on the common ground that runs between our properties. The previous board simply allowed you exclusive use as a courtesy." I scanned the document, which showed altered property lines that conveniently placed my pool in the common area. Something felt very wrong. "This doesn't make sense. I need you to leave while I sort this out." Her expression hardened. "Actually, you're the one trespassing on community property right now. I could call the police if you insist on causing trouble." I noticed the gate code had been changed. She had somehow reprogrammed my security system. A small sign had been placed on the fence. "Community pool, HOA members only." "I'll be calling an emergency meeting to discuss appropriate pool usage," she informed me coolly. "Until then, we all have equal rights to this amenity." Stunned, I retreated inside to gather my thoughts and search for my property documents. I located the folder containing my deed, the original property survey from my purchase, and all the permits for the pool that had been installed by the previous owner. Everything confirmed what I already knew. The pool was undeniably on my property. The next day, I received an official-looking notice under my door announcing an emergency HOA meeting regarding community pool access. I couldn't believe this was happening. At the meeting, nearly 20 homeowners gathered in our neighborhood clubhouse. The new neighbor stood at the front with 2 other board members who seemed uncomfortable, but remained silent. "As you all know," she began, "we've discovered that the pool behind my and this homeowner's properties is actually situated on common ground." She gestured toward me dismissively. "This means we all have access rights. I've prepared a schedule allowing everyone fair use." She distributed copies of a pool usage schedule that allotted me just 2 hours on Tuesday and Thursday evenings while giving generous blocks of time to herself and other board members. "Additionally," she continued, "we'll need to implement a maintenance fee for pool upkeep. Most members will pay $50 monthly during swim season, while the adjacent homeowner," she nodded in my direction, "will pay $300 monthly for proximity convenience." I stood up, documents in hand. I have my deed and property survey right here showing the pool is entirely on my property. I've owned it for 5 years without any question of ownership." "Those documents are outdated," she repeated firmly. "Our recent review shows differently." One of the board members, looking increasingly uncomfortable, asked to see my papers, but the new neighbor quickly interjected, "We can review those later. For now, let's discuss the schedule and fees." A few neighbors glanced sympathetically in my direction, but no one spoke up. I felt blindsided and isolated. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated rapidly. I came home from work to find strangers in my pool who informed me they had booked it through the HOA president. When I tried to explain the situation, they became hostile, claiming I was trying to monopolize community property. The new neighbor installed a larger sign declaring "Neighborhood Community Pool, hours 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily," without any authorization from me. When I removed it, I received an HOA violation notice threatening a $500 fine for tampering with community property. The final straw came when I arrived home to find the police in my backyard. The new neighbor had called them, claiming I was harassing pool users and trespassing on community property. "This is my house," I explained to the officers, showing them my ID with the matching address. "The pool is on my property according to all legal documents." The officers reviewed my deed but seemed hesitant to get involved. "This appears to be a civil dispute regarding property lines," one officer explained. "I'd recommend consulting with an attorney and getting an updated survey." After they left, I sat on my patio watching strangers splash in my pool, while the new neighbor smiled triumphantly from her lounge chair, my lounge chair. That evening I formulated a plan. This would require patience and methodical action. First, I contacted a professional surveyor to officially verify my property lines. It wasn't cheap, but it was necessary. While waiting for the appointment, I visited the county records office and obtained certified copies of all my property documents, including the original plat maps for the development. I installed security cameras covering my backyard and pool area, making sure they were visible enough to serve as both evidence collectors and deterrents. I also changed the locks on my gate, which prompted another angry visit from the new neighbor. "You can't restrict access to community property," she insisted. "I'm not restricting access to community property," I replied calmly. "I'm securing my private property until this matter is resolved." She threatened more fines and even legal action, but I stood firm. The surveyor arrived 3 days later and spent several hours taking precise measurements and checking the official markers. His conclusion was exactly what I expected. The pool was entirely within my property line, not even close to the common area. He provided an official certified survey with detailed measurements and photographs of the property markers. With this documentation in hand, I consulted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing my case, she wrote a formal cease and desist letter demanding the new neighbor stop trespassing and making false claims about my property. Meanwhile, I did some research into the new neighbor's background. A social media search revealed she had lived in another HOA community about 30 miles away. I reached out to a few residents there and discovered she had attempted a similar scheme involving a playground adjacent to her previous property. She had tried to claim it was for residents' exclusive use and had even collected playground maintenance fees from neighbors before being removed from that HOA board. The most damning evidence came when I carefully examined the documents she had presented. The letterhead didn't quite match other official HOA communications I had received previously. There were subtle differences in the font and spacing, and I noticed the contact information listed an email address slightly different from the official HOA email. Hers had an extra period that would redirect messages to her personal account. Armed with all this evidence, I requested a special HOA meeting through the proper channels. The vice president of the board, who had seemed uncomfortable with the situation from the beginning, quickly agreed. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Nearly every homeowner had shown up, curious about the dramatic situation unfolding in our usually quiet community. I had prepared a detailed presentation and had my attorney present. The new neighbor arrived looking confident, but that expression quickly faded as I began methodically presenting my evidence. First, I displayed the certified survey showing unequivocally that the pool was entirely within my property lines. I presented photographs of the property markers and explained how they aligned perfectly with my deed. Next, I played video footage from my security cameras, showing the new neighbor changing my gate code, installing unauthorized signs, and bringing strangers onto my property. Additionally, I continued, I've discovered that our HOA president has been collecting unauthorized pool usage fees from several residents. I displayed screenshots of payments sent to her personal account with memo lines reading, "pool fee." Several gasps echoed through the room as I revealed she had attempted similar tactics in her previous neighborhood. And finally, I said, displaying the altered documents side by side with legitimate HOA letterhead, these supposed official documents showing altered property lines are forgeries. Note the differences in letterhead and the incorrect contact information. The new neighbor jumped to her feet. This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. As president, I think we need to address these allegations before you continue in that role, interrupted the vice president, finding his voice at last. These are serious ethical violations if true. My attorney stepped forward and calmly explained the legal implications of trespassing, fraud, and misrepresentation. She noted that while she was prepared to take legal action against both the individual and potentially the HOA, she hoped the matter could be resolved more amicably. The board called for an immediate executive session, asking both me and the new neighbor to wait outside. 20 minutes later, they emerged with their decision. The new neighbor was immediately removed as president, pending further investigation into possible misappropriation of funds. The board issued a formal apology to me, acknowledging that the pool was indisputably on my private property. They agreed to send a clarification to all homeowners and to pay for any damages to my property, including the cost of rekeying the pool gate. Most satisfyingly, they voted to install a new fence clearly marking the boundary between my property and the common area, at the HOA expense. The new neighbor stormed out of the meeting before it concluded. Within 2 months, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house. To rebuild community goodwill, I hosted a proper pool party once the situation was fully resolved, inviting neighbors who had supported me, or who had at least not actively worked against me. The new interim HOA president gave a toast, acknowledging my patience throughout the ordeal and reaffirming the community's commitment to respecting private property. As a final precaution, I learned the new neighbor was attempting to join another HOA community in a neighboring town. Without malice, but with concern for others, I anonymously forwarded documentation about her previous behavior to their board. Sometimes standing up for yourself means preventing others from being victimized too. The pool remains my private oasis, but I still occasionally invite neighbors over for a swim. The difference now is that everyone understands and respects that an invitation is a privilege, not a right. Sometimes you have to draw a clear line, or in my case, a property line, to teach people where they stand. The first one is an entitled people story. For context, I had been working at this mid-sized marketing firm for almost 5 years. When I first started, it was a dream job. Good pay, decent benefits, and a team that felt like family. Our original boss, let's call him OG boss, was amazing, supportive, understanding, and genuinely cared about work-life balance. Under his leadership, the company thrived, and we were all happy to put in extra effort when needed because we knew he valued us. All that changed when OG boss retired and sold the company to a larger corporation. The new management sent in their own guy, who I'll refer to as Tyrant Boss. From day one, it was clear Tyrant Boss had one priority: squeezing every last drop of productivity out of us while cutting costs wherever possible. Within months, our once positive workplace turned toxic. Lunch breaks were scrutinized, bathroom visits were monitored, and suddenly we were expected to answer emails and calls at all hours. People started quitting left and right, but I stuck around partly because of loyalty to the clients I'd built relationships with, and partly because of the economic recession making job hunting difficult. My dad had been battling cancer for about 2 years at this point. It started in his lungs and eventually spread. The last few months had been rough, with him in and out of the hospital. Despite this personal struggle, I rarely took time off. I'd use my lunch breaks for hospital visits and would make up work hours late into the evening. My wife was incredibly supportive, picking up slack at home while I juggled everything. The weekend my dad took a turn for the worse. I was actually working on a Saturday to finish a major client presentation. I got the call from my mom around noon. "Honey, you need to come to the hospital. The doctors don't think he has much time left," she said, her voice breaking. I immediately packed up my laptop and sent an email to Tyrant Boss. "Family emergency. My father is in critical condition. I need to take a few days off. Will update when I can. All current projects are on track. Presentation for Monday is in the shared folder." I didn't wait for a response. My dad passed away early Sunday morning with all of us by his side. It was peaceful but devastating nonetheless. After the initial shock, there was the whirlwind of making funeral arrangements, contacting family members, and supporting my mom. On Monday morning, while meeting with the funeral director, I received a text from Tyrant Boss. "Sorry about your dad. Need you for the Apex client presentation at 2 p.m. today. Critical meeting." I was stunned. I had already completed the presentation and everything was ready to go. Any competent manager could have handled it. I texted back, "As I mentioned, family emergency. My father passed away yesterday. I'm handling funeral arrangements today. Everything for the presentation is prepared and in the shared folder." His response came almost immediately. Understood, but this client specifically wants you. Presentation shouldn't take more than 2 hours. Can you step away from family stuff for that time? We really need this account. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My dad had been dead for less than 24 hours. I was sitting in a funeral home choosing a casket, and he expected me to just step away to handle a client meeting. I took a deep breath and replied, I am literally at the funeral home right now. The funeral is scheduled for Wednesday. I will be back on Thursday. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Tyrant Boss. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, I know this is a tough time, he started, his voice falsely sympathetic. But I need to emphasize how important this client is. The presentation you prepared is good, but they specifically asked for you to present it. I can't, I said firmly. I'm in the middle of arranging my father's funeral. Look, his tone changed. We all have personal issues, but work doesn't stop. Can't someone else handle the funeral details? Maybe your mom or siblings, just for a couple of hours? I was speechless. The funeral director awkwardly pretended not to hear as I struggled to maintain my composure. My father died yesterday. I am not coming in today or tomorrow or the day of his funeral. I'll be back on Thursday. Tyrant Boss's voice hardened. I'm not asking you to skip the funeral. That's on Wednesday, right? I'm asking you to come in for 2 hours today for an important client meeting. If you can't put the company first for even 2 hours during a personal crisis, it makes me question your commitment. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of dedicated service, working weekends, taking client calls during family dinners, all while watching this man dismantle everything good about our workplace. Question my commitment? I said, my voice dangerously calm. I've worked here for 5 years. I've sacrificed countless evenings, weekends, and family events for this company. I finished the Apex presentation this weekend while my father was dying in the hospital. And now you're giving me grief about taking 3 days off to bury him? I understand you're emotional right now, he replied condescendingly. But business needs don't stop for personal tragedies. We all have to make sacrifices. That was it. The final straw. You know what? You're right. I do need to make a sacrifice. I sacrificed this job. I quit. Effective immediately. There was a stunned silence on the other end. You can't be serious, he finally said. You're throwing away your career over this? Think about what you're doing. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I replied. I'll email you instructions on where to send my final paycheck. Do not contact me again. I hung up and turned to the funeral director, who was trying very hard to look busy with his paperwork. Sorry about that, I said. No need to apologize, he replied quietly. I've seen worse. And for what it's worth, I think you made the right call. I felt a strange mix of terror and relief. I had just quit my job of 5 years with no backup plan in the middle of planning my dad's funeral during an economic downturn, but somehow I knew it was the right decision. When I told my wife what happened, I expected her to panic about our finances. Instead, she hugged me and said, I'm proud of you. Your dad would be too. The next few days were focused on the funeral and family. I received several texts and calls from Tyrant Boss, which I ignored. My coworkers, however, were reaching out with messages of support. Apparently, Tyrant Boss had told everyone I had abandoned the Apex client presentation at the last minute, but the truth quickly spread. The day after the funeral, I finally checked my work email to tie up loose ends and found my inbox flooded. Most notably, there was an email from the CEO of the parent company requesting a meeting. I was tempted to ignore it, but decided to hear them out. The CEO, surprisingly, asked to meet at a coffee shop near my house rather than at the office. When I arrived, she was already there. No entourage, just her with 2 cups of coffee. First, I want to express my condolences for your father, she said sincerely. What happened was inexcusable and I'm deeply sorry. I nodded, still guarded. I've been made aware of the situation with your manager. Several of your colleagues have reached out to HR and directly to me. This isn't the first complaint, but it's certainly the most egregious. She went on to explain that they had been receiving concerning reports about Tyrant Boss for months, but had been giving him the benefit of the doubt as he adjusted to the company culture. My situation had finally forced them to take a hard look at what was happening. We'd like you to reconsider your resignation, she said. With some changes, of course. What kind of changes? I asked skeptically. For starters, a different manager. As of this morning, he's no longer with the company. I couldn't hide my surprise. You fired him? Let's just say we had a mutual parting of ways, she said diplomatically. We're also reviewing all staff policies regarding personal leave and work expectations, and we'd like your input, given your history with the company before the acquisition. It was tempting, I'll admit, but something didn't feel right. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I think this happened for a reason. It made me realize I've been compromising too much of myself for this job. I think it's time for me to move on. She nodded, understanding. I suspected you might say that. In that case, I have a different proposal. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a consulting contract offering nearly double my previous salary for 20 hours a week, primarily working with the clients I had relationships with. We don't want to lose those client relationships, and they've specifically asked to continue working with you. This way you have income while you figure out your next steps, and we keep our clients happy. It was a surprisingly good offer. I told her I'd think about it and discuss it with my wife. That evening, as my wife and I were discussing the proposal, I received an unexpected call from the CFO of Apex, our biggest client. I heard what happened, he said. Your boss called trying to smooth things over after someone else botched the presentation. He mentioned you had abandoned the project due to personal issues and threw you under the bus. My assistant reminded him that I had lost my own father last year and suggested he might want to elaborate on these personal issues. That's when the story came out. I sighed. I'm sorry about the presentation. I had everything prepared, but... Stop right there, he interrupted. You have nothing to apologize for. That presentation was excellent, by the way. The materials you prepared were comprehensive enough that even the person who stumbled through it couldn't completely ruin it. He paused for a moment. The reason I'm calling is that we've decided to take our business elsewhere. We've been dissatisfied with the direction since the new management took over, and this was the last straw. But we'd like to keep working with you, whatever your next move is. By the end of the week, I had offers from 3 different clients wanting to work with me directly. It seemed the word had spread quickly. After careful consideration, I decided to decline the consulting offer from my former company and instead start my own small marketing consultancy. My wife, who had been wanting to pivot careers herself, joined me in the venture. The first year was challenging, as any new business is, but we managed to secure enough clients to stay afloat, many of them following me from my previous job. By the end of the second year, we were doing better financially than I ever had as an employee, and more importantly, I had control over my time and the types of clients we took on. As for Tyrant Boss, I heard through the grapevine that he struggled to find another management position in our industry after word got around about how he handled my situation. Apparently, forcing someone to work during their parents' funeral doesn't endear you to potential employers. Last I heard, he had moved to a different state to start over. The company itself underwent significant restructuring after losing several key clients, including Apex. They eventually stabilized, but never quite regained their former standing in the industry. I still think about my dad often, especially when making big business decisions. He was an entrepreneur himself and had always encouraged me to build something of your own. In a strange way, Tyrant Boss's callousness during my darkest moment pushed me to finally take that leap. If I could go back and tell my past self, sitting in that funeral home, feeling lost after quitting my job, that everything would not only be okay but better than before, I don't think I would have believed it. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, but only if you stand up for yourself when it matters most. The greatest lesson from all of this? No job is worth sacrificing your dignity or your ability to be present for life's most important moments. Not one client presentation, project deadline, or demanding boss is more important than being there when your family needs you most. And to anyone facing a similar situation, know your worth, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to walk away. Something better might be waiting just around the corner. Edit 1, Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thanks for all the supportive comments and awards. Edit 2, To clarify a few things people have asked about. Yes, I did get fully paid for all my work, including accrued vacation time. They didn't try to mess with my final paycheck. My mom is doing okay now. It was really tough for her at first, but she's found a great support group and even started volunteering. For those asking about Tyrant Boss, no, I don't feel bad for him. He made his choices. A lot of you have asked about starting your own business after leaving a toxic workplace. If that's something you're considering, feel free to message me. I'm happy to share what worked and what didn't in those early stages. Update: 2 years later. Hey everyone! I promised some of you who messaged me that I'd post an update when I hit the 2-year mark of my business, and here we are. A lot has happened since I walked out after Tyrant Boss tried to make me work on my dad's funeral day, and I figured you might want to hear how things turned out. First off, the business is doing way better than I ever expected. What started as just me and my wife working from our spare bedroom has grown into a proper company with 7 full-time employees and a real office downtown. We specialize in marketing for small to mid-sized businesses that want personalized attention. Basically the opposite of the corporate machine I left behind. The best part? 4 of my 7 employees are people who quit my old company after what happened with me. They reached out one by one over the months following my departure, each with their own horror stories about how things got even worse after I left. Apparently, the company went through 3 different managers in the span of 18 months trying to replace Tyrant Boss, but the damage was done to the culture. My former colleague Jeff, who had been at the company even longer than me, called me about 6 months after I quit. He was basically running himself into the ground trying to keep things afloat. "I can't do this anymore," he told me over coffee. "They've cut the staff by half but expect the same output. I'm working 70-hour weeks and my kid asked me yesterday if I still lived with them or just visited on weekends." I couldn't help but laugh. I know that feeling. "How's the freelance thing going?" he asked, clearly fishing. "It's not freelance anymore," I explained. "My wife and I turned it into a proper business. We've got more clients than we can handle, actually." His eyes lit up. "Are you hiring?" 2 weeks later, Jeff became our first employee. He took a pay cut initially, but within 6 months, he was making more than at his old job and working reasonable hours. He actually cried when he realized he could make it to his daughter's soccer games every weekend. Something similar happened with 3 other former colleagues. Each time I made sure they understood I wasn't hiring them just because of our history. They had to bring value to what we were building, and they have tremendously. As for the clients, remember Apex? They became our anchor client, and their CFO has become something of a mentor to me. He's connected us with several other major accounts and even invested in our recent expansion. Last month, he invited me to speak at their executive retreat about maintaining humanity in business relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. But here's the best part of the update, something I never saw coming. About 8 months ago, I got a certified letter from a law firm representing my old company. My heart sank when I opened it, thinking they were going to sue me for poaching their clients or employees. Instead, it was a settlement offer. Turns out, after I left, several other employees filed complaints with the Department of Labor about the company's leave policies and work expectations. Someone, I still don't know who, specifically cited my situation as an example of the toxic culture. This triggered an investigation which uncovered numerous labor violations, unpaid overtime, denied leave requests, improper terminations, you name it. The letter explained that as part of their settlement with the Department of Labor, they were required to compensate affected former employees. They offered me $78,000 in back pay and damages with no strings attached other than a standard release of claims. I called my lawyer immediately, suspicious that this was some kind of trap. She reviewed everything and confirmed it was legitimate. "They're paying you because they have to," she explained. "The government is forcing them to make this right. You can accept it without worrying about giving up any competitive advantages for your business." I signed the papers the next day. The check arrived a week later. My wife and I used part of it to finally take that trip to Europe we'd been putting off for years and invested the rest back into the business for a website upgrade and new project management software. Oh, and remember Tyrant Boss? I ran into him about 3 months ago at an industry conference. I was there as a featured speaker. Another thing I never saw coming. He was there. Well, I'm not sure why he was there. I spotted him lurking around the edges of the networking event after my talk. He looked different, cheaper suit, a little heavier, definitely less confident. I decided to be the bigger person and approached him. "Hey," I said, extending my hand. "It's been a while." He seemed surprised I was willing to speak to him. "It has," he agreed, shaking my hand limply. "Congratulations on your success. I've heard good things." "Thanks. What are you up to these days?" He explained he was working for a much smaller firm in a neighboring state, not in management anymore. "Just handling accounts," he said, a flash of bitterness crossing his face. "It's a step back, but it pays the bills." There was an awkward pause before he added, "I should have handled things differently with you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. I just nodded. "Your dad's funeral," he continued, looking uncomfortable. I was way out of line. The company was putting pressure on me about numbers, but that's no excuse. I didn't sleep for weeks after how everything went down. I could have laid into him, listed all the ways he'd made my life hell, reminded him how his actions had consequences. But honestly, looking at him, knowing where we both ended up, it just seemed unnecessary. "We all make mistakes," I said simply. "Some just have bigger consequences than others." Before walking away, I handed him my business card, force of habit at these events. If you ever want to grab coffee and catch up properly, give me a call. He never did call, which is probably for the best, but that brief interaction gave me something I didn't realize I needed. Closure. The lawsuit against my former company wrapped up completely about 6 weeks ago. In addition to the individual settlements, they were required to completely overhaul their leave policies and pay substantial fines. The parent company ultimately decided to cut their losses and sell the subsidiary to a local competitor, who's now in the process of rebuilding it from the ground up. As for me and my family, we're doing better than ever. My mom moved closer to us last year after selling the family home. She has dinner with us every Sunday and has become the unofficial office grandma to my employees, bringing in homemade cookies and giving unsolicited but usually spot-on advice about everything from marketing strategies to relationship problems. My wife and I are expecting our first child in a few months, something we had put off for years because I was always too busy with work. The timing finally feels right, and I know I'll be able to be present in a way I never could have at my old job. I've had a lot of time to reflect on everything that happened, especially as I prepare to become a father myself. I've realized that standing up to Tyrant Boss wasn't just about that moment, it was about deciding what kind of life I wanted to live and what I was willing to tolerate. My dad always told me, how people treat you is their karma, how you respond is yours. In his final gift to me, his passing created a situation that forced me to finally respond the right way. The business continues to grow, but I've been careful not to recreate the toxic environment I escaped. We have unlimited bereavement leave and flexible work arrangements. When one of our designers needed 3 weeks off unexpectedly to care for his sick mother, we didn't just approve it. We sent meals to his family and divvied up his workload without complaint. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just sucked it up that day, left the funeral home for 2 hours, and done the presentation. I probably would have kept getting pushed around, kept sacrificing my personal life for a company that didn't value me, kept putting off my dreams of starting my own business. In a weird way, I'm grateful to Tyrant Boss. His moment of extreme callousness became my moment of extreme clarity. Sometimes you need someone to cross a line so badly that you have no choice but to finally draw one of your own. For anyone reading this who's in a toxic work situation, I'm not saying you should quit on the spot without a plan, but I am saying that your worth isn't determined by your job, and sometimes the scary choice is the right one, and who knows. 2 years from now, you might be writing your own success story update. **, edit 3. **, thanks for all the congrats and awards on this update. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I did frame the settlement check, well, a copy of it, and it hangs in my office as a reminder. 2. No. I don't think I'll ever accept Tyrant Boss's almost apology as sincere. People who can ask someone to work on their dad's funeral day don't change that fundamentally. But I've moved on. 3. For those asking how to know when it's time to leave a toxic job, when you start dreading Sundays because Monday is coming, that's a pretty good sign. Life's too short. 4. Several people have asked for business advice in the DMs. The best advice I can give: treat your clients how you wish your boss had treated you, and you'll never lack for business. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I used to work in a hotel as a porter. We had to wear white shirts and black pants, and they provided us with a uniform, which was just a nondescript black vest. I worked there part-time, but also had another part-time job at the post office. I told them about the second job before they hired me. They asked me what I do about conflicting shifts, and I said I would work for whichever company booked my time first. So, if the post office said they wanted me next week on WedSat, and then later the hotel asked me to work that time, I'd have to say I was unavailable. I would also naturally do the same thing if the situations were reversed. I honored that agreement the entire time I worked for them, and it wasn't a problem for over a year. Then one day I get told by the hotel that I have to work an upcoming weekend. I said I couldn't accept the shift because I had already booked one at my second place of work. My hotel boss said, well, this is a huge contract, we have a massive wedding taking place on the same weekend as a large conference, and we need all hands on deck. I reminded them once again that I couldn't accept a shift if it conflicted with one I had previously booked. Boss got real annoyed and pushy and tried the "we have to be able to rely on you" bullshit spiel. I reminded him that they could rely on me doing exactly what I promised in my interview and that they had been able to rely on me for over a year. I also pointed out that it's not reasonable to demand that I work a shift that I hadn't agreed to work. Boss was still pissy when he hung up. They don't fire me, but over the next month I couldn't help but notice I never got any shift offers. It became obvious I was being fired, but without actually being told I was fired. I called several times and asked if there were any shifts, but always was told, "We have nothing for you at this time," in a cold tone. I checked with my friends who worked at the hotel and they all said that business was normal, and they could see no reason why I wasn't being offered shifts. No worries, I just picked up more shifts at the post office, and they paid almost twice as much. So cool by me. Another couple of weeks go by, and my direct supervisor at the hotel called me to ask for my uniform vest back. I asked why, saying that I hadn't been fired, so as far as I know I still worked there. My boss just kept sidestepping my question and refused to answer and refused to admit that I had been fired. He just kept saying, "We need that uniform, you have to give it back." I said, "No problem." He starts saying, "You can drop it off any time." And I interrupted him to say, "No, I won't be dropping it off." He stopped for a moment, flustered, then said, "But you have to. It's part of your employment contract." "Yes, I know," I replied. "I read the contract. It merely states that I have to return the uniform when requested. It doesn't say I have to deliver it to you, so I won't. You can send someone to pick it up at a time that is convenient to me." The hotel was in a different city from my hometown, so it was about a half-hour to 45-minute drive to my place. My ex-boss tried to bully me, but funny how losing his ability to deny me work had shifted our power balance. He sputtered and stammered as he tried to figure out some way to goad or coerce me into driving the vest to him, but finally gave up. He said he'd send someone sometime, so be ready for whenever that is, and I told him no, that he'd have to contact me to prearrange a time that was convenient. I said I'd check my calendar and he could call me back in a couple of days to make arrangements. Petty, I know, but hearing the exasperation and annoyance, his tone as we spoke was very, very enjoyable. He never did send anyone to pick up the vest, so I ended up using it as part of a Halloween costume. Zombie hotel porter. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.